8 months ago, I did a video where I predicted both the Eastern and Western Conference of MLS. And fast forward 8 months later, and fast forward to the end of the season, it's time to look back at those predictions and compare it to the real result of this season. And let's see, did I get some of them right, or did I get some of them terribly wrong? And believe me, I did get some terribly wrong in terms of the prediction I made back in late February. But we'll start in the Western Conference, and we start off with the Sounders, where I predicted the Sounders was going to finish top. Their actual finish was second place, and it's kind of a miracle, the fact that they actually finished second place in the Western Conference, because there was no point of this season the Sounders were anywhere close to being as a top two team. In fact, this is actually the highest position that the Sounders had all season long. And somehow, in some way, on decision day, all the games just play in their favor. And for some reason, of all the bullshitting that has happened this season, with them just once again punting the first half of the season and then having their usual resurgence in the second half of the season, they somehow still find themselves finished second in the league. I mean, I don't know what else to say about this team. It's one thing to do it one season, and the fact that maybe they kind of got lucky, but it's another if they done it 3 times now in the last 3 seasons. And then I predicted Sporting KC was going to finish second. Their actual finish was first, and I thought Sporting KC was going to be pretty high up because they did make a couple of good signings, and those signings really helped, with guys like Johnny Russell scoring the goal and Felipe Gutierrez, who looked very good earlier in the season, and now just getting back after he suffered a couple of injury and still looked very good. And then I said the Timbers was going to finish third. They actually finished fifth. And I thought the Timbers were probably going to take one step back this year. And in fact, they kind of did took that step back, despite the fact that they did sign a couple of players. Mainly because I just were worrying about their defense. And it turns out the defense was not the issue for the Timbers this year. The interesting thing about the Timbers and the problem they have is just winning away from Providence Park. Other than that, they just been, throughout the season, they've been having this kind of grind out kind of mentality where they just keep grinding games and don't win games pretty, but yet they still get all 3 points at the end of the day. And then I said RSL was going to finish fourth. They actually finished sixth, and they actually almost missed the playoffs. They can thank Houston from what happened on decision day. And I thought RSL was probably going to take a step forward in terms of what they did last year at the end of the season. Well, it turns out they kind of took a step back, and yet somehow they're still in the playoffs. It's quite amazing. And then I said the Quakes will finish fifth, and this is where probably this is the worst prediction that I made, and this is probably the one that, yeah, I just have to look at myself and said that is just, I didn't think that this season would be so bad for us, and I didn't think what you would think things could go wrong with this team would actually happen. I didn't think that, we were going to just completely shit the bed on defense. I thought when we made some couple of new signings, they can somehow kind of stable our defense. It turns out that was not the case, and also the fact that we keep blowing leads late in the game. We're basically doing the opposite thing of what we've been doing for the past couple of seasons and all those Goonies kind of magic moment. But in terms of FC Dallas, I said that they finished 6th place in the Western Conference, and they actually finished 4th place. And like what I said about Seattle, of how, I don't know how in the world did they finish second. I don't know how in the world did Dallas finish 4th. And this does not mean in a positive way. It actually means in a negative way, because Dallas were at the top of the standing for majority of this year. Well, actually, except for the beginning of the year, where they kind of got off to a slow start. But they were on top for majority of the year. And yet, somehow on decision day, they just completely fall apart and got down to 4th place. And then I said LAFC was going to finish 7th place. They actually finished 3rd. And the reason why I said LAFC was going to finish 7th is that I was very kind of concerned with the lack of squad depth that this team has, and just you don't know what's going to happen with this expansion team. I mean, I know we saw Atlanta in their expansion season and how good it is, but we don't know it's going to happen again for LAFC, and it turns out this season they kind of proved me wrong, and they definitely exceed expectation and even one up what Atlanta did last season in their inaugural season. And then I said the Galaxy was going to finish 8th place. They finished 7th place, and my God, they should have been in the playoffs. I mean, the Galaxy, I knew that this team, with them getting a new back line, maybe it was going to be better, but I'm just worried about the chemistry of this team. Well, in some way, that was kind of an issue, but it was mostly the back line that they bought. Wow. That was a huge waste of money by the Galaxy, because their back line was non-existent in this season. And then I said Houston was going to finish 9th, and look at that. First one I got right. I predicted that they're going to finish 9th. They did finish 9th place, and I thought Houston was going to maybe take a step back because they did lose a couple of key players, but I didn't expect them to blow leads so regularly like they have done throughout this season. And then I said the Whitecaps was going to finish in 10th place, and they actually finished in 8th place. And, you know, like I said about Houston, I thought Vancouver was going to take a step back because teams was going to figure out their counter-attacking style, and they just don't have creativity. And lo and behold, that is exactly the biggest problem so far for Vancouver this season and why they missed the playoffs. And then I said Minnesota was going to finish 11th. Turns out they finished 10th place. I guess they improved from last season, although I think last season they finished 10th place too. So I don't know if that's actually improvement for Minnesota, but at least they did not finish. They did not finish like one place from dead last like they did last season, I believe. And then I said the Rapids was going to finish dead last. They finished 11th place. And, you know, if it wasn't for the Quakes having a historic bad year, Colorado would have been dead last in the Western Conference. And they show this season why they finished dead last in the league. They were horrible throughout the season. So when you look at the Western Conference prediction that I made in the beginning of the season, I gotta say, I didn't really do that badly. I think in some way I actually did pretty well in terms of this prediction. I mean, I got 5 of the 6 teams that I predicted that was going to be in the playoffs to be in the playoffs. The only team that I got it wrong was none other than the San Jose Earthquakes, who just all hell just broke loose for the Quakes this season. But other than that, that's a pretty good kind of start in terms of looking at how I did in my prediction of the Western Conference. Now, let's get to the Eastern Conference, and let's see if it gets a little bit better. Although, I think if you just keep staring at this side of the board, you can see how things kind of takes a bit of a turn in terms of how good I did in my prediction. But first, I said TFC was going to finish top. It turns out they finished 9th. And I thought they were going to recover after that long CCL run that they had. They never did. And part of that has to do with injury, but also part of that has to do with players just running out of gas and underachieving. And then I said Atlanta was going to finish in 2nd place, and look at that. They actually finished 2nd place. Although they should have finished 1st place and should have won Supporters Shield, because they had that Supporters Shield race wrapped up. It looked like a couple of weeks ago, but then somehow in some way they choked it in the last game, and unfortunately they just have to settle for that 2nd spot. And then I said NYCFC was going to finish 3rd, and would you look at that, they actually finished 3rd this season. And you know, let's be honest with NYCFC, this definitely has been just a crazy season for them in terms of them starting so good and then just kind of fall apart in the second half of the season. Although now I think when they got guys back from the injury reserve, guys like Medina and also Yangel Herrera, I think this team would definitely be as good as they were in the beginning of the season. And then I said Orlando City was going to finish 4th place, and they finished 11th. And this is pretty much similar to what I said about the Quakes. I thought Orlando City, with all those moves that they done, I thought for sure they were going to compete. Yeah, they definitely did not compete this year. I mean, holy crap, Orlando City. All those guys you bought were literally just a complete waste of money. And yeah, it's crazy. This is probably the biggest shock of the season. I know people will say that the Quakes, with what happened this offseason, with the expectation, and you would think that they would go take a step forward instead of taking like 5 steps backwards. But for Orlando City, of all those players that they bought, guys like Sasha Kleshton, Russell, and Coman, all those guys tends to be a huge flop for this team, and they just finished 11th place, which is dead last in the Eastern Conference. I mean, nobody would have thought Orlando City would be finished dead last in the Eastern Conference. And then I said the Red Bulls was gonna finish 5th place, but it turns out they won Supporter Shield, and I thought the Red Bulls, they were probably gonna take a step back because they lost Sasha Kleshton. And you know, the question is that will BWP continue to score goals at a record pace, and whether or not, if this team that has lost a lot of their key players and a lot of those players that were supposed to be the core of this team, are they going to recover? Oh yeah, they definitely recover. They just got a whole ton better, and a lot of that has to do with the academy of the Red Bulls. I mean, all those players that you see are mostly academy player for this team. And then I said Chicago was going to finish in 6th place, but instead Chicago finished 10th. And you know, I thought the Fire was going to take a couple of steps back because of the loss of David Accam, and it turns out they not only took a couple of steps back, but they took 5 or 10 steps backwards. I mean, they were pretty bad between June to October, where they just did not show up whatsoever. And part of that has to do with injury, but also part of that has to do with just the team. They cannot really function without David Accam. And then Columbus, I said that they were going to finish in 7th place. They end up finish in 5th place. And you know, for Columbus, this year has been kind of an interesting year, because on one hand they've been very good in terms of defending, but on one hand they have been very bad in terms of scoring. So they're kind of like just grinding out resort throughout the season, and somehow they grind their way into the playoffs. And Greg Berhalter continued to do his magic with this team, even though this team is definitely not as good as the Columbus Crew team of last season. And then I said the Union was going to finish in 8th place, because I thought with them getting David Accam, you know, it was a big signing, but I still don't know if it's enough. Well, it turns out they finished 6th place, and it turns out that David Accam wasn't even a factor with this team. It was mainly because of the homegrown player that out of the blue just decided to show up and decided to prove everybody wrong that you know, these homegrown player is not just gonna just going to not show their talent and just be a bad team. I mean, when the Union put all those homegrown players, I thought for sure that this is not gonna end up very well for the Union, and people were getting into Jim Curtin and want him to get fired. And look what happened a couple of months later. Those homegrown player has really stepped up, and it's funny how they still are calling Jim Curtin's head and they still want him to fire. Like, seriously, Philly, you just got to the playoffs. Okay, yes, you're probably gonna lose to NYCFC in this midweek, and it's gonna be another failure. And okay, yes, you lost the US Open Cup final, the one that you probably should have won. But at the end of the day, you keep forgetting that the guys that is on your team, they are so young. Like, this is a very young team. You're going to have more chances in the future. This is basically like the process of the Union, pretty much. And God, I don't know why a lot of Philadelphia's sports team love to do the process. I mean, it all started with the Sixers, and now it's happening with the Union too. And then you look at DC United. I said that they were going to finish in ninth, and it turns out they finished in fourth. Now, I did not expect Wayne Rooney to be on this team in the beginning of this season, and he was basically the X factor of this team. And if he wasn't with this team at any point of this season, no way in the world DC United would be in the playoffs right now. And then I said Montreal was going to finish in 10th place, but it turns out they actually finished in 7th. And, you know, credit to Montreal. I thought in the beginning of the season they were kind of screwed because they didn't really do anything in the offseason to address some of their big issue, which is, you know, striker and also defense. But it turns out Piatti had a career year and pretty much was carrying the team. But unfortunately, when you have only one guy that carry your team, usually that does not end up very well, and that was the case with Montreal. And I'll talk more about it when I do the moving forward series for Montreal a little bit later. But finally, we got the Revs, who I thought they were gonna finish dead last because of the whole league win saga in the beginning of the year, and the fact that this team just had no defense, no midfield, and no striker. And yet somehow they finished 8th in the standing, and they were really in the play above the playoff line for majority of the season. This team really overachieved for pretty much the first half of the season, and then in the second half of the season, that was pretty much the Revs team that I thought was supposed to be. Guys like Theo Bunbury, Diego Fagundes, and Pineda, that was kind of like overachieving and kind of just surprised everyone with their productivity. Once that productivity went down, so did the Revs in terms of their standings. But yeah, in terms of the Eastern Conference, you know, 1, 2, 3. I only got 3 out of 6 in terms of the team that made the playoffs, and I got a bad prediction for TFC, Orlando City. You could say the Red Bulls too, because I thought they were gonna take a step back, but they just had like the best season in MLS. And DC United, although I think this should be an excuse because I didn't expect Wayne Rooney to come to this team in the beginning of the year. And yeah, overall I did much better in terms of the Western Conference than I did in the Eastern Conference. But either way, that is pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Make sure you also check out my MLS playoff prediction where I filled out the bracket and did the power rankings of the team most likely to win MLS Cup. And yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.